Andy Karsner is former DOE Assistant Secretary for Energy Efficiency and Renewable Energy, and more importantly, right now, the founder of Manifest Energy. Andy, great to have you with us again.
Good to be with you, Tyler.
Interesting point you brought up during your panel discussion today, that it is, and I'll paraphrase rather than quote, the government's role to create conducive policy, a policy climate that is conducive to energy growth, clean energy growth in the country.
Well, that's right. I mean, fundamentally, you've got to catalyze the private sector to have continuous, consistent capital formation to enable society's goals. And so we need a light touch with a simple rule set that enables private equity to flow into the energy economy we want to create.
A light touch. Does the current administration's approach qualify as that? Just yesterday, Treasury Secretary Geithner and Energy Secretary Chu were talking about the influx of capital through the Stimulus Act. Is that the light touch you're talking about?
No, the government can't spend enough to enable its goals. So the capital we actually want to have is private sector capital. The private sector capital will find a home. It won't stay parked. It's just going to our competitors abroad, principally to China. So I think they're doing the best they can under the circumstances coming out of an economic crisis to get us to a point of stability. But no, there's been a deluge of capital on a few select projects, and that's kind of a repeat of where we were in the 70s. We really need the government's balance sheet for scaled procurement. We really need it to enable things like nuclear and solar and things that have market imperfections to overcome those market barriers, not sort of just to select a few different companies and supercharge them.
And you made an interesting point about the timeline here, Andy, and regarding your role in the private sector, the fact that you need long-term policy, long-term certainty, rather than something on the legislative calendar.
Well, I think that's right. And fundamentally, this is all about price signal, supply and demand. We shouldn't sort of forget the very basic nature of the energy economy. And so if you want to affect diversifying supply, if you want to curb and ebb demand through greater efficiency, ultimately it's a price signal. And so we're having a very round-the-barn discussion on what structure to put in for a carbon price premium or a gas tax. We need to have a very sort of honest, transparent discussion on what the simplest, durable price signal that could be bought in on a bipartisan basis so that it'll be around and not just switch election to election could be. And I don't think we've fully gotten that kind of bipartisan work done yet.
One example, Andy, of a policy or initiative that crosses over administrations is the influential report that you had such a strong hand in, the 20 by 30 report, in terms of wind energy generation and potential and growth here in the U.S. Is policy following through with what you predicted during the previous administration? Is everything still on track?
I want to make it clear, that report was groundbreaking in a certain way. It was a technical and economic feasibility of what a potential prime mover or source could do. It wasn't a prediction. It wasn't a forecast. But to answer your question, I think both our administration and this administration has fallen into customary and traditional policy traps that breed incrementalism, cycle to cycle, appropriation to appropriation. And you cannot do things like grow domestic sources of clean energy, domestic sources of energy at all, whether it's nuclear or natural gas, wind, solar, et cetera, if you don't take a longer view than our incremental appropriation cycle here in Washington.
Regarding Manifest Energy, coming out of the economic downturn, if we are indeed coming out, and indications are that that is the case, is this the perfect time to get into the clean energy sector?
I was also representing Applied Materials here today, and the CEO of Applied, Mike Splinter, was 20 years working for Andy Grove. Grove's thesis at Intel was always invest through the downturn so that you can take market share in the upturn. And I agree with that thesis. So now is not the time to sort of be cowering or putting our heads back into a turtle shell. The idea is to actually forecast visibility, take advantage of distressed inventories, distressed opportunities, and vertically integrate and rationalize supply chain. So that's really what Manifest is doing, is trying to rationalize the supply chain and compress cost to make renewable energy much more competitive today.
The issue of competitiveness, Andy, specifically U.S. competitiveness, does all this need to be domestic generation, domestic production, domestic manufacturing maintained within the country?
I'm obviously bullish on that. Again, sort of harkening back to Applied, we get 85% of our revenue abroad. So capital is global. This can be a win-win for the planet. I'm all for this being an export-driven economy and us continuing sales abroad. But as a person who intends to raise my family here and pass on a better future for my children, we have absolutely got to build here, build now, the infrastructure and manufacturing base we need.
Final question, Andy. I will ask for a prediction right now. Looking into your crystal ball and your experience in public and private sector, where are we in 5 years, 10 years from now?
I think so much depends on whether we have the boldness of leadership at political levels to give us a durable price signal. Everything else is chatter. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of grants. There's a lot of loan guarantees. There's a lot of discussions on new superstructures that will take us where we need to be. A price signal to guide the marketplace and let the market perform will determine where we are. And so I wouldn't be good. I couldn't look in the crystal ball, but I'll tell you I'm going to work relentlessly to erode the addiction to oil and make us more competitive.
And your preference for that price signal on carbon?
My preference would be a revenue-neutral gas tax, offset by alleviating taxes on payroll and income, taxing the things we don't want, an addiction to oil or security or harm to our environment, and alleviating the taxes dollar for dollar on things we do want, greater payroll, greater income.
Andy Karsner, formerly of DOE, now with Applied as well as Manifest Energy. Andy,
thanks.
Always great to have you with us.
Yeah,
Good panel discussion today.